Hello internet friends, and welcome back to what I guess is my ever-evolving love and obsession with quality clothing. So listen, I've been thrifting for over a decade, which I know to some is like, that's not really that long. But for me, I mean, we're talking at least 20 years of thrifting, but I would say honed in, zeroed in, all in, thrifting almost every single day at some points in time. I would say probably 10 to 15 years. Thrifting no doubt took a chokehold on my life out of 100% necessity. I got a job in my early 20s working at Nordstrom, and I was living on my own in Los Angeles and I couldn't afford even rent. So, you know, tale as old as time, like I had to dress a certain way, but I couldn't afford the clothes that enabled me to dress a certain way. Plus I worked amongst a crowd of people who were all going to FITM. Pretty much everybody that I worked with at Nordstrom was enrolled in FITM. FITM is like the elite school for fashion. Thrifting 1000% changed how I dress, how I shop, how I see trends, and honestly, how I even see myself. It taught me more than any magazine, any Pinterest board, or any influencer outfit of the day ever could. I didn't have a fashion degree, but I did have racks and racks of discarded clothes to study. And what I learned from it all changed the way that I dress forever. So today I'm gonna share with you how thrifting completely rewired my brain and helped me get a closet and a wardrobe that I actually love. Obviously, my channel is built on quality clothing, so we're not gonna go too much into that because I feel like I've done a pretty good job of building a foundation of what to look for, and I'm gonna leave those links in the video description. The more you thrift, you can start to tell polyester from a mile away. You can spot the really good craftsmanship. I feel like I've already dived into that enough that doesn't, you know, we're just scratching the surface with what thrifting actually taught me. But you really truly do learn the touch and the feel of garments. Like I've said it over and over and over again, but going out and touching clothes at a thrift store, it's just a masterclass in education on what a good garment actually looks like and feels like, because you can start to find the differences. As long as you can start to find good quality items, you can compare them to those bad quality items and realize where the differences lie. But I also learned, if you want to know if a piece of clothing is going to last, you don't have to look at the brand. That's not going to tell you that answer. You need to look at the actual piece of clothing, the craftsmanship, what type of fabric they were using, how it's made. And it's gotten even harder for some generations to understand what quality clothing actually looks like, because if you walk into any retail store, the majority of the clothes all look and feel the same. When Old Navy and Gap start to feel the exact same way, but the price points are just slightly different because a pattern is different, it just really starts to skew our perception of what is actually worth our money. And I think going to a thrift store and starting to understand these little nuances about what goes into good quality clothing, again, I'm gonna call it what it is. It's a masterclass in understanding clothing. Taking a real quick break from thrifting, I want to thank today's sponsor, Suvie. Suvie is a smart countertop oven and gourmet meal delivery service. You just load your meal into these pans, tap the recipe card to the machine, and choose when you want your dinner to be ready. That's it. Thanks to their cool to cook technology, the ingredients stay refrigerated until it's time to cook. So I can set it up in the morning and come home after thrifting to a freshly cooked, balanced meal without lifting a finger. And the food? Actually good. There are over 50 chef design meals to choose from, plus the oven itself has over 15 cook modes. So if you want to use your own ingredients, go for it. You can bake, roast, air fry, sous vide, whatever vibe you're feeling. Sous vide gives you flexibility, good food, and your time back. It's honestly the perfect addition to my post-thrifting, I just want to come home and relax lifestyle. If you want to try it out, Suvie is offering a 100-day risk-free trial, and I've got a special link in the description. You'll also get 16 meals free with your order. So thanks again, Suvie, for sponsoring today's video. I'm gonna go eat dinner now. So when I was working at Nordstrom, I actually started dabbling in selling vintage. This was like Nasty Gal era. She had already established her store and she was like, you know, the queen of selling vintage on eBay. That's how old I am. It was quite an interesting journey for me because I quickly learned how to identify vintage items. Like finding a vintage piece of clothing in a thrift store was like, it was what I zeroed in on, but I was ignoring all the rest of the clothing. So I didn't actually really watch the progression of how bad clothing quality was getting. It wasn't until probably about I'd say probably 6 or 7 years into selling vintage, I finally opened up my store to modern day clothing. And I was buying these pieces, like I was getting really good quality vintage. And then I was buying these pieces that were modern clothing to mix in and kind of like beef up my store. And I was like, oh yeah, this is not the same. Trust me, I don't think the light bulb moment took that long to go off, but it really was a wake up call. The moment I started putting modern clothing into my store, it was just so frustrating to see the disparity in the quality of these clothes. The standout moment for me though was when all of these brands started popping off. Now travel back in time with me real quick and let's reflect on probably 2017 to 2018 when all of these kind of cool it girl brands started popping up. Like we're talking Reformation, we're talking House of Sunny, all those very well marketed and curated brands on Instagram. Because I was based in Los Angeles, I was quickly starting to see these brands pop up in the thrift store. I was getting my hands on them and thinking, oh my gosh, I covet these brands. Like I was eating up those advertisements and thinking, that's it. That's the answer right there. Like I need to get my hands on those brands and I'm gonna be the cool it girl that Instagram is telling me I can be. And the moment I would find these pieces of clothing and compare them to like Forever 21 or, I mean, Shein wasn't really a thing back then, but you get the drift. You compared it to fast fashion and you were like, I don't know if there is that big of a difference in this. You start looking at the Revolve website and realize starting price for a lot of these dresses are $100+. It was getting so frustrating to find these pieces amongst the racks and think, these were supposed to be the brands that like would solve all of our problems and make us feel so fashion forward and trendy and look cool and feel good and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it just hit me like a ton of bricks though, when you start feeling these garments and realizing that the quality and craftsmanship just does not live up to what you would think the price standards are asking. I quickly realized that these brands have a ton of money on the back end for advertisements, but they are not putting the quality into the actual clothing themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, some pieces from Reformation are good. They are 100% worth the price point, and I do think there's a little bit of a breakdown that you could probably do as far as, you know, labor and choices that they make in fabric. There's a lot more nuance to unpack with that, but I do feel like Reformation aside, there are a lot of brands out there that solely rely on advertisements, and with the power of Instagram, it has just completely changed how we shop. But I think going into the thrift store and seeing these pieces at the price points that you can find them and just connecting the dots and realizing that like, oh man, these are not worth the $200 to $300 that they are asking for. It is truly an eye-opening experience and will quickly teach you the value of money and clothing. And I think the worst part of it all is you can't feel quality through a phone screen, and the majority of these brands that are so hyped up don't have brick and mortar stores. So you're forced to have the experience for yourself and buy these items and realize like, oh, they weren't really as good as what I thought they were gonna be. The next lesson that I learned with thrifting is the algorithm is not your friend. There is such a huge difference in what you find at the thrift store versus what you see online, and the thrift stores are a reflection of how people are dressing or were dressing 5 years ago. And you can so quickly start to see the trends that have come and gone in the thrift stores. It's essentially a graveyard for clothing. So you can go in there and start to rifle through all of the like poor choices or mistakes that just didn't work out for the consumer when they purchased them. And in the mix of all that, you find the pieces that you can tell were really well loved, but maybe just don't serve a purpose for that person any longer. And you quickly start to pick up on what the trendy pieces are, because those are often the pieces that are over and over and over again. Think like a cold shoulder top. I mean, those pieces maybe like 10 years ago were all the rage, but now they're just kind of part of the thrift store wasteland. And going back to the algorithm isn't your friend, you're constantly being served these advertisements for clothing, and oftentimes it's by influencers that aren't actually wearing the clothing. They're wearing them for the pictures, they're wearing them for the video or whatever, and then they're donating them to the thrift store. And then you find them at the thrift store and you think, I get it. I can totally see and understand why this was not a wearable piece of clothing. This was a meme. This was something that was meant to be shown and either passed around or gotten attention of some kind. I really do think there's like a meme crisis in fashion where there are some really cool avant-garde pieces out there, but they are not by any means wearable. I think it's a huge conundrum in women's clothing because we love beautiful garments. We are so drawn to these opulent pieces and these showstopper numbers, but they just aren't really rooted in reality. And you'll find these pieces over and over and over again at the thrift store. They were like a one-time purchase, a one-time picture, a one-time you name it, and then they just end up in the wasteland, in the graveyard. The hardest thing to discern is creators are oftentimes gifted clothing. They're not paying for these pieces, so the value means nothing to them. They don't understand the difference between a $200 piece of clothing and a $400 piece of clothing when they're getting it for free. Going into the thrift store and seeing these pieces firsthand, because they are oftentimes donated because because they are not able to be worn again gives you such a quick education on where the value actually lies in clothing. But I think the biggest lesson for me when it came to myself personally and my relationship with clothing is finding my style amongst the decades. You can sit there and pin items all day long, but going out there and looking at every single decade of clothing, because trust me, a thrift store has all of the decades wrapped up in one store, allows you to really get a connection on what your style is. And the more you like grow those thrift muscles, you start to realize what kind of decades you gravitate towards. What do I keep reaching for? And what makes me feel like myself, no matter the year? It doesn't need to be what was in style in 2018 or what's in style right now. What is it that I keep gravitating towards? When you're surrounded by every decade, every silhouette, every wild experiment fashion's ever tried, you start to notice the patterns that speak to you. For me, it was soft tailoring, clean lines, good denim, like really good denim. Like I've touched 1940s denim. That was really, really good. I found myself falling in love with the same shapes over and over and over again. And it was only because I was going to the thrift store consistently that I discovered these things. This doesn't really tie into the video very well, but I really truly think style comes down to something that you notice about yourself, not something that you're copying in other people. But I don't think it would have been possible to find these things about my style had I just been sticking to retail stores, because retail stores are so rigid in what they offer. If you walk into a Banana Republic, for instance, it's going to be one type of clothing. If you walk into an H&M, you have this like mashup of just strictly trends. I mean, you could walk into a Uniqlo and probably find some stuff that works for yourself, but it's not going to define your style necessarily. And I think going to a thrift store can help you really unpack what your style actually looks like, because you have a smorgasbord of every type of fashion that was ever out there, that was ever produced. I think in every single thrift store, there's going to be something that you're gonna connect to. Maybe it's not the winner, it's probably not gonna be the piece that's gonna like revolutionize your wardrobe, but I think it's gonna be a stepping stone in helping you discover what your personal style looks like and what it is that you find yourself gravitating towards. And slowly but surely you can start to unpack that about yourself, which actually brings me to a whole other element of what thrifting taught me. Working at Nordstrom and finding myself being solely interested in fashion felt really great and empowering. And I thought like, oh wow, this is like a big, bold career move for me. Like maybe I could go into clothing. And then I grew into reselling and, you know, the whole vintage sales and all that kind of stuff. For the longest time, I had such a love-hate relationship with myself. I loved what I did and I still love what I do. But there was this level of like, I don't want to call it shallowness, but you know, fashion can sometimes be fed to you as if it's like this really shallow outlet. It's overconsumption, it's beauty in something so frivolous. But then when you start to unpack the history of fashion and understand all of the different ways that it's shaped our society, it's shaped our history, every aspect of fashion is embedded in human history and can explain so much about our connections and our driving force for what we do in art and creativity. There are so many endless layers that can help you fall in love with fashion and understanding what it can do for you personally and your own confidence, but also what it does for a society. There's a lot of positive spins that you can bring into fashion, but on the flip side, it's something that can really make you feel like it's a fruitless exploration and not something that you should be investing any time or money into because of all of its negative impacts. Honestly, I think if I hadn't gone the thrift store route, I probably still wouldn't be in fashion, because it made me feel like I at least had a better relationship with clothing and understanding the level of consumerism that we're at this point in history. And you know, I'm not trying to say that if you're in fashion and you're not in the thrift store side of fashion that you're doing it wrong. I'm just saying it helped me understand my relationship with clothing and helped me feel like I could continue on this journey. Maybe not guiltless, like I still hold this level of guilt that, you know, maybe sometimes isn't very healthy for me, but it does help me unpack my relationship a lot better with clothing. I think allowing myself to be critical of clothing as opposed to walking into a retail store and just feeling like everything looks pretty and I should buy it all, versus being very critical and looking at my relationship to clothing and understanding the impact that it has on so many different facets of life, whether it's your personal finances or the state of climate change. There's so many different ways to unpack your relationship with clothing, but I weirdly think thrifting tied it all in to helping me understand these things. I think the best part about this journey for me though is thrifting didn't change just how I see secondhand clothes, it's changed how I see all clothes. And the truth is, I do shop retail again. For the longest time, I would say my wardrobe, aside from like undergarments, was 100% thrifted. But I have finally reached the point where I've started to shop retail again. But it's different now because I'm different now, because I've had this education of thrifting. I've had this long, drawn out education of what good quality clothing actually looks like. So yet again, I just had to make a quick love letter to thrifting, because it's weird, because I think I'm reaching a point on my channel where I'm not going thrifting as much as I used to, and it kind of hurts me a little bit. Like I get a little sad, but I also really like this rhythm of not filming in a store. I was never very good at filming in public, and I just never really felt comfortable, and I think it showed on my channel. But having this ability to have a conversation with you about the things that I find interesting and the things that I'm drawn to, I feel like helps me articulate a little bit more the feelings that I have to these things. And to close out this video, I actually want to talk a little bit about brands. I think this is a new element that I want to start including in each video that I do, because I talk so much about quality clothing, and I'm really trying to push the idea of like brands that value their customers and value what it is that they're building. I thought it would be kind of fun to include a list of brands that I love finding at the thrift store, and I want to make sure that I include all different sizes. My personal favorite brand to find at a thrift store is Alex Mill. Alex Mill comes from Mickey Drexler, who really helped shape J. Crew's brand from 2003 to 2017. He has a really interesting background when it comes to retail, and I think Alex Mill is kind of that answer to what we miss with J. Crew, which, little spoiler for you, I have J. Crew coming up as one of my videos that I'm working on. I also love finding Doen, that's an obvious one. And there's a brand, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's either Ruka or Roka. They have some of the coolest pants I have ever come across, and the quality is there. They're kind of a little bit edgier in style, and I think that's what I like about them. I really want to make an effort to include plus size brands as well. I see you guys in the comments, and I know there is so much of a conversation around that. Some of my all-time favorite brands that I have ever found have actually been plus size. Eskandar is one of my personal favorites. If you look up prices on those, though, they are not cheap, but if you like natural fibers and you like good craftsmanship, Eskandar, it is chef's kiss. It definitely falls into what is known as the kind of like Lagen look or art to wear category, but I think no matter what, they are beautiful pieces. And the last one is Marina Rinaldi. I've found this brand, oh my gosh, like so many times, and every single time I've come across it, I'm just like, this is the showstopper number, and I'll tell you why. It's part of the Max Mara family. So as someone who loves Max Mara but can't afford Max Mara, I get stoked whenever I find that brand. I think pretty much every piece that I've ever found from Marina Rinaldi were linen or silk. So that says a lot right there. That is it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and as always, for letting me talk about my love for thrifting. If anybody wants to know why I didn't have a video to upload last week, it was because of this. It took me 10 years to pick up these books. I don't know why it took me so long, but I breezed through these, and now I am coming off of such a high. I even thrifted the fourth one, or no, I thrifted the fifth one 2 years ago, and I knew I was gonna eventually read these. It took me way too long, and now I am not only going to be single for the rest of my life after reading these, but I also am gonna need some book recommendations, so leave them down below.